All right, welcome on holding by Pirkei Avos, ethics for our fathers. Again, welcome on holding by Pirkei Avos, ethics for our fathers. We are in chapter Mishnah 16, and this is going to be part 64. There'll be a part 65, part 66, I'm sure. Again, welcome on holding by Pirkei Avos, ethics for our fathers. Chapter 2, Mishnah 16. We spent the last number of weeks speaking about the evil inclination, right? Rabbi Yeshua says, right, or said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, that an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of others, of other people, take a person out of this world. So we spoke quite a bit about the evil inclination. We're going to actually move on. Pretty surprising. We're going to move on and speak about hatred of others. Yeah, now, what does it mean? What does it mean, hatred of others? Now, we know that the Torah itself and the book of Leviticus tells us that you're not allowed, a Jew, not allowed to hate another Jew in their heart. Right? Technically, that means, I could hate non-Jews, right? Technically. Not allowed to bear a grudge against anyone, right? We're not allowed to take revenge. But even if it would be permissible, let's say, to, hate, let's say a non-Jew, right? So no one's going to say it's a good thing, right? Definitely got to get it out of your heart somehow, right? It's just going to fester. It's going to make a person angry, right? There's no real point. A person will tell me, well, they did this to me, that to me. The other thing to me, very good. That may all be true, but again, is that all psychologists will tell you, probably not a good thing to have this in your heart. Probably not a good thing just to let it fester, right? Obviously, better to get it out, so to speak. But what does it mean over here? What does it mean to hate someone? So here, Bartanur and others say hatred of others mean unlawful hatred. Right? In other words, unlawful hatred means exactly what it sounds like. In other words, it's not warranted. So you could ask the question, you could ask the $1 million question, is hatred ever warranted? Right? So comes along King Solomon. King Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, King Solomon says what? King Solomon says that there's an issue with what? There's an issue that there's a time to love and there is a time to hate. So as King Solomon says there, right, as he says there in Proverbs, right, he makes very clear there's a time to hate. So what does it mean over here? That you shouldn't hate. Now he's talking about hating a non-Jew. Technically, I could hate a non-Jew in my heart. Yeah, technically. No one's going to say it's a good thing, but technically wouldn't be a problem. Is Rabbi Shua here talking about, or say better, is King Solomon talking about hatred in general? Is he talking about hatred just, a Jew against a Jew, Jew against a non-Jew, right? He's saying that there's time to love, there's time to hate. Now, simply we could say he's not talking about hating a person. That would be forbidden, right? That's Torah obligation, right? Or let's say better, Torah prohibition. Torah prohibition says, you can hate a Jew in my heart, right? So who can he hate? So you can hate the action, right? We always say you hate the action and not the person. Now, what if a person was really bad? What if a person was, really evil? So, okay. Yeah, it might be a different issue. Yeah, there probably is a different issue. Someone caused a person like serious damage. So this is going to be a very hard thing. Right? It's going to be a very hard thing not to hate them in your heart. Now, we don't, we always say, if you can think about the bigger picture, if you can say, well, God's really controlling everything, and as Chosov says, in the gate of Muna B'tachon, the gate of B'tachon, right? He says, believe in faith in God. He says that anything that happens, right? Anything that happens only happens because God wills it, for good or for bad. In other words, there's no good or bad that'll happen in the world unless God wants it to happen. Meaning, if God doesn't want it to happen, well, guess what? It's not going to happen. If God wants it to happen, okay, it'll happen. Now, a person takes up the mantle and does it. They may be guilty of causing damage and other things. Very good. Yeah. But God, again, is using that person as a stick, as we always say. So there's no point to be mad at the stick, right, in general, but God's the one sending them there to do whatever, right? In other words, they have free choice. I'm not putting a gun to their head, but they do have free choice. So nonetheless, they're still guilty, right? Still 100% guilty, right? So there, King Solomon says, time to love, time to hate. So we can say, very simple, he's talking about hatred of an act of what the person does, not the person themselves. You're going to tell me, this Jew did X, Y, or Z really bad. Well, something really bad. It's going to be hard not to hate them. Very good. Going to be very hard. Not only that, we say every night before you go to sleep that you forgive if anyone's ever done anything bad to you, right? Whether in this world, right, or previous Gilgul, let's say, or previous reincarnated, soul, whatever. Okay, but the question comes up, and I spoke about this last week, I think. Question comes up: what if you can't? Like, how's that possible? Someone did something totally reprehensible. Okay, yeah, within reason. God's not going to punish a person because someone stole their money or raped them or did other things, right? I mean, they're going to be guilty and say, well, I have to love the person. Well, I'm not going to go that far. Certainly not. No one's capable of that. Very few people. I mean, someone was capable of that and they could see the bigger picture and whatever, then, the Messiah will come tomorrow. I mean, that's pretty much an impossibility, right? God's not going to expect someone to do something impossible, right? Again, according to a person's level, even if we think we can't do certain things, obviously, if God feels that we can, okay, it's a different issue, right? That's a very different issue. But the idea is hatred over here, right? It says Bartanur, one of the great commentaries on the Mishnah. The Bartanur over here says, and others echo the similar thing, it's talking about unlawful hatred, right? It's talking about hatred where it's not warranted. Yeah, in other words, it's hatred for no reason. So what's the example? What's an example? We can think of. We know that Second Temple was destroyed because of this, right? Because of what we call chinam, this unlawful hatred, and obviously, and speaking badly against others, right? Lashon hara, right? Very clear. So what does it mean? What does it mean? You have unlawful hatred, right? What does unlawful hatred over here mean? So Rav Lev should be say that unlawful hatred is like this. Unlawful hatred means if there's somebody less religious than you. Yeah, as you can say, I'll try and draw them close, other things, but you say, why do I have a relationship with them? You'll say, I'm not going to learn bad things from them. I'm not going to fall under their influence to the point where I'll do what they do. Probably not true, but let's say, right? Let's say they say, I can hang out with them. I can do things with them. I just won't learn from their bad actions. Okay, right? Let's say that's true. I don't think it's true, but let's say that's true. Okay. Now, what about someone more religious than you? You say, oh, the person's fanatic. They're adding things to the Torah. No one really has to do that. They're holding to a higher standard. So they'll say, but I'm just as religious. I do this, that, and the other thing. So you can't say I'm not Jewish. They think I'm not Jewish. Well, they didn't say you weren't Jewish. Right? Unless your mother's not Jewish or there's something happened down the line. right? Where then it would call into question their Judaism and say, but I'm also Jewish. Okay. Doesn't change anything. So what? Yeah. But what are they saying? They're saying, I don't have to be like you. You think, and this comes up, this comes up probably more often than not. You think you have a monopoly on Torah. Right? You think you speak for God. No, we don't speak for God. God speaks for himself. Yeah. What does the Torah say? Does the Torah say I'm allowed to do this or not allowed to do this? Yeah. We're not going to get into rabbinic things and why do I have to listen to the rabbis? And that comes up quite a bit. Is it permissible or not permissible according to the Torah to do X, Y, or Z? Yeah. No, but it can't mean this. All right. So now you're going to Webster's 8th definition. Yeah. So what does it mean? What does the Torah mean when it says, I don't know, don't bear a grudge against someone? What does that mean? Bearing a grudge in your heart seemingly means whatever they did, yeah, within reason, even if they caused you damage. We're not going to talk about trauma. Trauma you throw out the window here. It's a whole different case. But somebody does something wrong against someone else. Can someone essentially have that hatred in their heart? It's forbidden. The Torah says it's forbidden. Yeah, but they really did X, Y, or Z. Okay. What did we say before? Nothing happens in the world, good or bad, unless God wants it to happen. So this person, God is using as a stick. He's using to get to you. So then why are you upset? Why are you upset at the person? You can be upset with God. You could say, God, why are you doing this? Right? You can make such a claim. This isn't fair, right? We've spoken about that quite a bit, right? Life isn't fair. Why should this happen? I can think of a lot of reasons why, but it's not the point. Essentially, it's not the point. What's the point? If something happens, it's because we deserve it. 99% of the time. The 1% of the time, where it could be a person has to go through it anyway because of their, whatever their soul has to fix up in this world. Okay. Right? Reincarnation. But it's like 1%. Right? It's not a big percentage over here. Could be. I don't know. Right? But again, let's say it's not a big percentage. So 99.9% of everything that we go through in this world is because of what we've done. Yeah? So it's not about what life's fair or not fair. It's God judging us. Yeah? We can say the judgment may be too harsh. We can say a lot of different things. Yeah? It doesn't matter. Point is, it's probably things we've done. Right? So if the Gemara says in Brachas, if it's you can't figure out what you did, which probably we'll never figure out the measure for measure. It could have been something we're liable for 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. God had mercy, and now he doesn't have mercy anymore. Right? So he's gonna nail you for whatever you did. You gotta look into it. You gotta see. Right? You gotta see what you did, potentially. Right? But again, it's catch-22. Because we just said if you look into it, you probably never figure it out. So if we never figure it out, then what's the point? Then what can I fix? How do I know what to fix? We probably know. Most people probably know things they do wrong. Right? Maybe things they do very wrong. Maybe things, maybe only sometimes they do wrong. Whatever it is. Right? Whatever it is. But at the end of the day, what happens over here? What happens is someone who's less religious than me, what can I say? I won't learn from their actions. Again, probably not true, but I won't learn from their actions. Someone who's more religious than me, what's a person obviously going to say? Person will say, they're not going to say, well, they hold to a higher standard. And that's really where I should be holding. They're not saying that, right? They're not saying that, essentially. At the end of the day, what happens? You're saying, I'm just as Jewish. You're saying, I'm just as good. Well, why are you getting hot under the collar? Because you're going to say, a person will say, because they they look down upon me. They don't think I'm Jewish. So again, we already answered that. Not a question whether someone thinks you're Jewish or not. That's not the issue, right? Again, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. Even your mother's married to a non-Jew, you're still Jewish. Okay, you got a blemish on your soul, but you're Jewish, right? There's nothing to talk about. Okay. Yeah, so what are they getting so upset about? A former student of mine once said, they, with a Jew making this comment, they weren't Jewish yet. And they said, you're holding by, a certain thing. You're holding by a certain thing. Why are you doing this? You're not even Jewish yet. Now that's a total prohibition of what we call onus devar. Not allowed to make fun of others or remind them of things they've done in the past. Right? In other words, a person couldn't say to a secular Jew, I remember you used to do this. Or I remember you used to do that. Things that are forbidden. Yeah? That's total prohibition. It's a severe total prohibition. To remind, let's say someone converted. Very good. Let's say someone had a proper conversion. Yeah. They had a proper conversion and they say, why, I remember you used to do this. Or I remember you used to do that. Or I remember you used to do the other thing. Yeah. Torah prohibition. 100% Torah prohibition. So in that case, you can't remind them. Can't remind them of what they've done. Right? So in the case we brought up before, a person's doing something, a non-Jew, right? Let's say. Non-Jew's doing something. So this other Jew says, you're not even Jewish. Why are you doing that? It's also sinat. It's also unlawful hatred. Why is it unlawful hatred? Why is it unlawful hatred? Because they're saying I'm just as Jewish. Right? They're making fun over here. They're saying that, you're doing this stringent, whatever, but you're not even Jewish yet. Right? As if to say, okay, why don't you do it? If this non-Jew is doing it, why shouldn't you do it? You also have an obligation to do it, let's say. So why is it not done? Why didn't you do it? Right? So they want to say, come on, I'm just as Jewish. So they're making fun. Yeah. They're making fun of something which is forbidden. So again, someone less religious, what could I say? Very good. I can hang out with them, but it's probably bad. But I won't learn from them. Right? I want to be with them. They're funny to be around. They're good to be around. All these things. Okay, very good. Yeah. But I won't learn from their actions. Okay. Right? Again, probably not true, but okay. Now, what happens if someone does something they're more religious? Now, isn't someone going to take offense? Someone who doesn't do it, won't they take offense? But you say, why should they care? Why should they care? Because there's a statement being made here. Yeah, the non-Jew doesn't care what anyone else is doing, per se. They can do what they need, what they feel comfortable doing. Okay. Yeah. They're gonna feel bad. No, let's say not feel bad. They are going to do what they need to do. So they hear about this law, whatever it is, they're gonna start keeping it. Okay. So they're not Jewish. But why is someone looking down on them? Why is someone saying, why are you doing that? You're not even Jewish yet. That's unlawful hatred. That's as if to say, why aren't you doing it? Right? They're not calling into question, this convert or potential convert is not calling into question what the person does or not does, or not do. What are they doing? They're doing whatever they need to do. Yeah, they're following this law. Okay. Now, obviously, the other person isn't. Now, if the other person isn't, why aren't they following it? Laziness. Maybe they think it's a stringency. I don't know. Could be a lot of potential reasons why they don't do it. Comes along this Jew and says, I'm just as Jewish. They're not saying that directly, but that's what they mean. They're saying, I'm just as Jewish. Why are you doing it? You're not even Jewish yet. That is making fun of them. Yeah. In other words, they're holding by a standard this non-Jew in the pursuit of conversion, i.e. a JIT. We're going to call a Jew in training here. Yeah, they're holding by something that this modern Orthodox Jew, let's say, doesn't do. So the modern Orthodox Jew takes it out on them. Like, oh, you think you're so Jewish? Yeah, you think we really have to do this? You're not even Jewish yet. Right? That's sinat chinam. That is unlawful hatred. Unlawful hatred means there's no reason. There's no base. Right? There's no base for doing such a thing. Since there's no base for doing such a thing, yeah, that's called unlawful hatred. Right? As Rav Leff would say. Right? So again, if someone is on the same level and they're either doing certain things or not doing certain things, okay. The other person's not going to feel threatened. The other person's not going to say, oh, do you think you're better, blah, blah, blah. Yeah? They're not going to think that. But if this person is doing something they're not doing, right, when really they should be, let's say, then they cop an attitude. Why they cop an attitude? Why they cop an attitude over here? They cop an attitude because they think, which isn't true, but it's because, they're weak in their beliefs and whatever. What are they thinking? They're thinking, you're telling me what I do is not good enough. That my Judaism isn't good enough. And that you look down upon me. Now, you never said anything. You never intimated everything. You're doing a certain thing, whatever it is. That a lot of people do. This person doesn't. Okay. This Jew doesn't. So now this Jew calls out this other person and says, why are you doing this? Yeah. They're not questioning, you should do it, you shouldn't do it. That wasn't the issue. What are they saying? They're not just saying, why do you do this? They're saying further. They're saying you're not obligated to do it. You're not even Jewish yet. You see the tinge over here? It's negative. Yeah, they're going to tell you why you don't have to do it. But even without that, what are they telling you? They're telling you you're not even Jewish yet. That's sinat chinam. That's unlawful hatred. That's hatred not based on anything. Yeah, it's based, well, I shouldn't say based on anything. I mean, that is true. But what are they saying? Oh, you don't think I'm good enough. Oh, you think, just because, I don't know, I watch sports or movies, that I'm this, that, and the other thing. And you think you're better, but you're not even Jewish yet. That's what they're saying. They think they're being judged. Yeah, no one's judging them. They didn't have this conversation. Nobody's judging them. They got up to do a certain mitzvah. Okay. So the other person takes offense. Well, I don't do that. Yeah, it's just a stringency. Let's say it's a stringency. Okay. So they want to take on this stringency. So what do you care? What do you care if they take it on or they don't take it on? How does that affect you? How does that affect your spouse, your kids, if you have? How does that affect you? It doesn't affect you. Shouldn't affect you. But obviously they're coming out very strong against it. Why are they coming very strong against it? Because they're going to say, you think I'm not religious enough. You're looking down upon me. No one's looking down upon anybody. Yeah. Like someone told me many years ago. I think either when I was first married or engaged. Someone, secular Jew, says, a prominent doctor to boot. Yeah. Yeah, in the community they live in. Okay. So they say, I'm offended by the way you dress. I was like, all right, like what are you offended by? I wear a white shirt, blue pants with, dark blue with or without pinstripes, dark black with or without pinstripes, Yeah, or dark gray with or without pinstripes. And I wear tzitzis, and I wear them out, and I wear a yarmulke, and I wear a hat and a jacket. Yeah. So what do what's the problem? I said, I answered the question with another question. I said, if I sat on your roof, most of the day, I shaved my head, right? Let's say I had a mohawk. Can't imagine, I don't have it here anyway, but, let's say I had a mohawk, I smoked dope every day, and I played the guitar. Does that bother you? That's what I asked them. I said, would that bother you? He got thinking and thinking. The prominent doctor, it's not not someone who, has a 25 IQ. Let's say he's pretty bright. I would think pretty bright. In the secular world, okay. So after like a few seconds, I said, "You really have to think about this." I said, "This is like a real option to think about." I said, "Here you have somebody, wants to have good values, wants to go in the right way or try and go in the right way, the best of their ability, give good values to their kids, and you have to ask that question." Yeah, it's a real question. It's a real question. Yeah, so that's a sad result. It's an absolutely sad result. Why? Because what do they feel uncomfortable with? Now, again, I never said anything. See, if I said it, I have no problem admitting this. If I would say something and to cause someone to be upset, okay. I mean, I've probably done it. I probably may do it in the future. Hopefully not, right? But it's inevitable. Not everyone's going to agree with everything you say. Okay. Yeah. So good. You make a mistake. You should admit you made a mistake. Okay. But this has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with anything. You didn't say anything. You're being whoever you are. The person makes a statement. Now, why do they make the statement? Why does a Jew make the statement? Because their soul's crying out and saying, "Hey, this person dresses this way. This person keeps the Sabbath, keeps Shabbos. This person keeps Torah mitzvahs, and I don't." So they think I'm not even Jewish. Now, that conversation never happened, right? In other words, we never had this conversation. The person made a statement. The statement was, "I'm offended by the way you dress." That was the statement. There was no clarification of the statement. There was nothing like, "Well, you think I'm not Jewish. Well, you think that." There's no clarification. That was a statement. That was a statement. Yeah. "I'm offended by the way you dress." Now, I'm telling you, potentially, what's behind the statement. Right? Obviously, someone doesn't necessarily feel so good in their Jewish identity for whatever reason. So they're going to take it out on an Orthodox Jew. And who happens to be there? Me. So they're going to say, "That's offensive." It's offensive. My wife wearing a burqa? No. That could be offensive. That I could hear being offensive. Yeah. I can think of a lot of things that potentially could be offensive. Why is this offensive? If I was exposing body parts, that wouldn't be offensive. Probably. Yeah. That wouldn't be offensive. We'll keep this clean. Yeah. That wouldn't be as offensive. You dress in a suit every day, that's offensive. Why is that offensive? Yeah. So the unspoken conversation, this person's thinking in their mind, again, my opinion for what it's worth, but what are they thinking? You don't think I'm Jewish enough. You think you're religious, you think you're better. That conversation never happened. Yeah. Never happened. Now, why would they think that? Because the spark that every Jew has, what we call the Pintel Yid, the spark that every Jew has, they know what the truth is. Doesn't matter how convoluted it sounds. Doesn't matter in anything. They know what the truth is. They know what the truth is. Yeah, but they don't want to hear the truth. They want, they want to live how how they want to live. They don't want you dictating to them how to live their lives. Now, again, did the conversation come up where I said, I think you dress like a guy? That conversation come up? No. Never came up. Never said anything. No matter what I thought or not thought, that never came up. Yeah. But there's something inside them telling them there's something wrong with them, even if you didn't have the conversation. Just by the way a person dresses. But again, think about it. Think about it. If what I told them they had to think about, shaving my head, drugs, sitting on the roof, not doing anything, playing the guitar, that's not offensive. Right? That's maybe you'll say that's not being productive. Okay. What are they going to have less issue with? They're going to have less issue with that or the other way? They're going to have less issue with that. Why? Because I think eventually, a person will become quote unquote normal. They'll grow their hair back. Maybe they'll do less drugs. I don't know, whatever it is, get a job, be a productive person in society, whatever. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of people look at religion as in like these people are fanatics and these people are nuts, right? But what's the most important thing, I think, what's the most important thing people complain about? They do not want to be told what to do, right? Now, a lot of people say they believe in God. Okay. But they don't want to be subservient. So what does that mean? You believe in God? I believe there's a higher being. Okay, good. That's a lot of people believe in a higher being. Okay. Yeah. Is there any obligations to that higher being? It's whatever I think. Whatever I think. Based on whatever I think. But I don't subscribe to one religion. I like all religions. Yeah. Be very open-minded here. Okay. So now you want to, so you take a little bit here, a little bit there, but which one is right? That doesn't matter. They're all good. I can take, a mixture of both. 3, 5, 10. I can incorporate all these things. But you're making up your own thing. Doesn't matter. It's what I feel. Okay, bottom line is what I feel. It's what I feel okay. In God's eyes. Not in my eyes. Right? A person admits is supernatural. Very good. So what does that mean? Do I have to serve them? I don't have to serve them. Does it matter what I do? Is there reward and punishment? Again, most people, their secular Jews keep certain things. Okay, as long as it's not inconvenient. If it's inconvenient, right? If it's inconvenient, then what? They don't want to do it. They're not interested in doing it. Why are they not interested? Right? Right? Why are they not interested? Because they don't want to be inconvenienced. Right? So I had somebody finally admit after years that has nothing to do with what they think about Judaism and other things. Yeah, why they don't keep mitzvahs? Why don't they keep what they're supposed to keep? So finally, I just told them, just admit you don't want to be inconvenienced. That's what it's about. It's not about Webster's 8 definitions, not about this, not about that. You read the old, I don't know, German footnotes and who knows what, became an abikoros, person became a heretic. No desire. That's what it is today. It's all about desire. Very good. So it's all about desire. Just tell me, I don't want to be inconvenienced. So the person said, so, if I admit it, are we good? Just admit it. I'm not going to be good, but just admit it. Don't make up things. Yeah, just say, I don't want to be inconvenienced. So finally, over the years, they admitted it. It had nothing to do with truth, nothing to do with searching. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do this, but I don't want to be inconvenienced. You want to be inconvenienced. You want to do whatever. Okay. So where do you draw the line here? Where in the world do you draw the line here? How many people are really searching for truth? There are people, right? There are 80,000 different religions. So they must be searching for something, right? But what do you have? What do you have in general? You have people, okay, as the Gemara says, you want to go on the right path, God will help you. Very good. You want to go on the wrong path, it won't stop you. Okay. Very good. That's all true. Yeah, that's all very true. But you have to want the truth. If you don't want the truth, you want fantasy, good. So God will let you pursue fantasy. Okay. But don't you think if there is a supernatural out there, i.e., we're going to call it God, for lack of a better term, so what do you do to serve him? It's only one God. And let's say there is, okay, very good. They say, but there are 80,000 different religions. How do I know which one is true? Okay, that's a different issue. How why people would ask the question. But what's the bottom line here? Right, a bunch of questions here to deal with in a second. What's the bottom line? People don't deal with reality. People want to do what they want. Yeah, people want to do what they want. Now, that means if you do something, let's say a person does something, for the sake of Judaism, and they want to hold to, let's say, a higher standard. So, someone, secular Jew could say, oh, you think you're this, you think you're that, you think you're the other thing. No one's claiming to be anything they're not. Yeah. If this is forbidden to do, it's forbidden. Why is it forbidden? Because God says it's forbidden. And I believe in God. Okay, people don't like that, but too bad, right? Yeah. So I can't believe this is what the Torah meant. Okay. I can't believe God would rip toilet paper not on Shabbos. I don't know. Torah says death penalty if you do it. Right? Forget about when the death penalty was ever given and whatever. Okay. So why would God care? Why would God give death penalty if it wasn't something so serious? Okay, so you have to understand what it means, right? And what it is, like, oh, I'm not into any of these things. Okay. You make a choice. Everybody makes a choice. But even though everyone makes a choice, the million-dollar question is, so what do you care if I do it or not? Someone's told me a place in Brooklyn. Yeah. Shabbos morning, or let's say early afternoon, people come out of synagogue. Imagine thousands of people coming out of synagogue. All different streets, whatever. They come out of synagogue. Yeah. In a sea of black. All people wearing black, and their taluses, white taluses, black and white. Yeah. So someone makes a flippant comment, right? And someone says, yeah, it's all sea of black. So I said, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. See, thousands of people went to synagogue on Shabbos. Beautiful. What do you care? You don't live there. You're not part of the people around there can't get around because there are thousands of people coming out of synagogue. You don't live in the vicinity. You're not in the same state, right? Let's say. And even someone would be. What's so bad? Why do they look down upon it? Because they, secular Jew, are not in synagogue. They have no interest to go to synagogue. And most likely they're probably married to a non-Jew anyway. But why do they make fun? You're going to say, oh, I'm not good enough because I don't go to synagogue. I don't go on Shabbos. I don't keep Shabbos. Now again, you think any of these people are thinking that? They're not thinking that. They're like, I'm hungry. Let's eat. It's late, right? Have some cholet. Let's get some food in us. Yeah. They're thinking about secular Jews that drive on Shabbos. They're not thinking about that. They're thinking about the ones that eat pork and do other things. No. The ones that are into marriage, they care less. Right? They 100% care less. I guarantee the majority think on their mind after they come out of synagogue, gather their kids, whatever, they're going home. You know why they're going home? Because they're hungry. They tell me, oh, there's a kiddush there, so they'll be less hungry. Okay. Yeah. But what's the most important thing after that? Food. Right? You make kiddush. If you have to make kiddush again, right? You have a motzi, you have food. They're not thinking anything else. I mean, it shouldn't be, right? That's going to be the most important thing. You say, what? They're thinking about food. They're hungry, right? I think thousands of people went to synagogues. What's the problem? Why is someone making fun of that? They're going to say, because it's funny. But what? But deep down, people don't say things for nothing. As we always say, a person makes a statement because they think it. No matter how long they thought about it, they think it. And now they make the statement, even, every statement, even someone makes fun of something, a little bit of truth into everything, little bit. Well, some things may have no truth in it, okay. Yeah. But there'll be things that, yeah, so why are they making fun of it? Because they know I'm just kidding, it's just a funny thing. But why? It's funny to see a whole group of Jews, like a sea of black coming out. Okay, so let me ask. If you went into a Sikh neighborhood, let's say, and whatever day, whatever time they pray, whatever it is, let's say you have a whole neighborhood of people going into their shrines or who knows what, and they all come out in a sea of red and white, right? Would you say the same thing? Oh, look, here comes the sea of red and white. With the funny turbans. Well, they may think it. Some people may think it. I don't think they would say it. Now, some people might, because they don't care what they say and they don't care if they offend anybody. But I think some people probably wouldn't say it, even if they thought it. Yeah. Yeah, they're not going to say it. Probably. Because if they did, people are going to look at them like being racist, which seemingly it would be. So why would they say, oh, a whole sea of blacks just came out? So they say no different. They're just making fun of it. But again, are they going to make fun of Hindus that way? Are they going to make fun of Sikhs that way? Are they going to make fun of Muslims that way? Yeah, now, some people might. Some people will throw them all under the bus. Yeah, right? And make fun of all of them and all the, funny things they do. Okay. Yeah. If that would be the case, then what I said up until now doesn't hold any water. But methinks that's not the case. And they wouldn't say it. A Jew wouldn't say it. Even if he thinks it, probably won't say it. But against other Jews, let's say other Orthodox Jews, why would they say it? Why would they say it? This is exactly the point. Because even if someone said, as someone said to me, I'm offended by the way you dress. I don't know this person from Adam. Yeah? I don't know this person well at all. So I don't know this person well at all. Yeah? I mean, know a little bit better, right, over the years. Okay. We never had a conversation. We never sat down. The person's like, why would you do this? Why would you change your whole life? Why would your spouse change your whole life? That conversation never happened. As a side point, the last 30 years, right, more than 32 years, I'll age myself a little bit, that conversation never come up with anybody. Nobody's ever asked the question. But those are kind of interesting. Right? Those are kind of interesting. Someone once said to me, just while I'm on this thread, someone once said, why would a non-Jew want to convert? Secular Jew asked the question. Say, okay. Yeah, I said, I got a different question. I said, I'll answer the question, but I got a different question. Why would a secular Jew want to become religious? Like, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. Rather than, okay, so what's the answer? So I said the answer was that there are people in the world, which they probably could never imagine. There are people in the world, right? There are people in the world that can't imagine, cannot imagine for the life of them there are people actually searching for truth. But again, the vast majority of people say they believe in God. Okay, some level. But the question is, they have no idea why someone would want to become an Orthodox Jew, not to mention a convert. So they asked me the following question, right? This happened many years ago, and the question, and that was the question. So I answered them, and I said maybe they're searching for truth. Most people I deal with came out of Christianity, saw that it was false. Yeah, probably 98% or so came out of Christianity and saw it was false. So Christianity is based on Judaism. They go look into Judaism. Some become Messianic, some become Noahides. Reform, conservative. Eventually, if they're searching for truth, they'll get the truth. So I said basically that was my answer. I gave a very short answer. The answer was they're searching for truth. There are people actually out there, Jews, non-Jews, searching for truth. So what was the person's response? Can't make this up. I always say, fact is greater than fiction. What did the person say? They looked me straight in the eye, and they said, "Come on, get real." That was the answer. I said, "I am getting real." That's what happened. I said, the vast majority of people are searching for truth. And what did they say? No. They said, it's not true. I said, this is the field I'm in. I do happen to be somewhat of an expert in it. I said, but there are actually people that search for truth. They like that conversation went nowhere. Yeah, absolutely nowhere. They couldn't imagine such a thing. Why would anyone search the truth? Search for truth. Right? It must be they messed up upbringings, financial upheaval, sickness, this, that. It could be. Could be certain things spurred it. Right? But I always say if a Jew or a non-Jew has money, right? Let's say they have significant amount of money and possessions and all that, why would they want to become religious? Makes sense. Right? Definitely makes sense. Heard of cases, secular Jews become Orthodox Jews, and they have plenty of money. They have, wealth of money. Okay. It's rare. Because if you have money in general, you have no needs. You are your own God. Or you pick your other gods, right? Whether it's food, whether it's entertainment, whether it's, I don't know, whatever. Whatever it is, you'll pick another God. People who have money don't pray to God, usually. They have egos bigger than infinity. What do they need God for? Self-made man, I don't need gods. I'm in charge. I do everything, really? Do everything? Right? We can break this down and say that's not true or whatever. We're not going to. But what's the point? It's not just the poor person or people go through trials, come to God. Some people do because they're going to question certain things, right? But the vast majority of people that are going to convert, at least from what I've seen over the last, more than 20 years, is going to be because the religion they were in is false. And they came to that conclusion. So now they want to have a real relationship to God. Very good. There's a small percentage that didn't have any religion. And we're searching for something that's going to stick, so to speak, give value, let's say, to their kids. Okay, but that's a minority. It's a huge minority. Yeah. In other words, it almost doesn't exist. Right? Now, why would a secular Jew become religious? Because they're looking for meaning in life. So they figured, if they're Jewish, they're looking at Judaism. Now, some people will look everywhere besides Judaism, which is kind of ironic. Yeah, because they don't think Judaism has anything to offer because of how they were brought up and how they went to Hebrew school and whatever. They don't think it's got anything to offer. Okay. But they'll come to it if they want to, based on a desire for meaning. everybody's searching for meaning. Everybody wants to have a relationship with God. So many people say they believe in God. What does that relationship mean? What kind of connection do they have? So I was being interviewed, going to rabbinical school at the time. This local paper, interviews me, and they got actually the quote right. And I said that, a lot of people say they believe in God. And my answer was, I think it's garbage. Let's quote it better. I think it's a bunch of garbage. Now, why do I say something like that? Because I think it's true. Yeah, they believe in God. What aspect of their lives are godly? What are they doing? How are they doing anything are they praying to him? They change the way they eat? Are there holidays they celebrate? What do they do? All these quote-unquote religious people. I mean, they're not religious per se. It's funny, Christians don't know anything about their religion. They still call themselves Christian. So you have a whole bunch, Bible thumpers go to church every Sunday or maybe during the week, whatever it is, but a whole heck of a lot don't do anything. They do very little. Okay. There's other religions, much more strict and whatever. Okay. At least they're doing something, let's say. Yeah, most of them are idolaters, but okay. At the end of the day, why should anybody care? Right? That was the whole point. Why should a secular Jew care the way I dress? Or the way my kids dress? The way my spouse dresses? Why should that matter? Antiquated laws. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't say anywhere in the Bible. Doesn't say anywhere in the Torah. They're not even saying that. They're just making fun of it. Yeah? Why? What do they care? I mean, how many ultra-Orthodox Jews go around saying, oh, secular Jews, all this, that, and that? They don't care unless you're involved in Jewish outreach. They go about their business, do what they're supposed to do, hopefully. Work, provide for their families, and that's it. They're not having these philosophical conversations unless they're involved in outreach. If they're not involved in outreach, they're not really thinking about it. They're thinking about, what's the most important thing they're thinking about? Survival. That's what they're thinking about. They're thinking about how they're going to marry off their kids, how they're going to pay tuition. Basic things. They're thinking about secular Jews and the way they dress and this and that. They may think, oh, I saw a secular Jew, every part of their body was pierced and this and that. They're like, oh, tragic, this, that. They'll move on. They're going to give it a second thought. Again, unless they're involved in outreach or something like that, fine. For the most part, it will not affect. I'm not saying it's a good thing, whatever. But what are they thinking about? What's the most important thing? Themselves, their families, taking care of their needs. That's the biggest thing today. I'm not worried about a person dresses this way, that way, the other. Okay, got to deal with it. We're in society. It's deal with other people. Very good. But that's the first thing they're thinking about. 100% not thinking about what these people do or not do, unless it definitely affects them directly. And if it doesn't affect them directly, they're not going to care. Yeah. Give an example. They got a colleague. Yeah, they work for a company, whatever it is. Colleagues don't have same-sex marriage. Yeah. That affects the person directly. Yeah. You can't say it's a good thing. You can't wish the mazel tov, whatever. There are things you can't do. Yeah. Okay. So that's a different issue. That'll affect someone in a direct way. If it doesn't affect someone, right? If something doesn't affect them, then it's not going to affect them. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Right? It's going to be, it's going to be irrelevant. So if someone lives far away from any Orthodox Jewish community, and they hear on Shabbos say, whole sea of black, why do they care? Because it's funny. People say it's funny. Okay. But again, are they going to say the same thing? Are they going to say the same thing about Sikhs? About Hindus? About Muslims? Muslims, they won't say, they'll burn down their house. Yeah, be careful what they say. Okay. But they're not going to say it. In general, they're not going to say it. Because if they would say it, they'd be called racist. But why do they say it about their own kind? A certain group, of Hasidim, right? They're, they wear these, what do you call it? They wear these, they call it Tod, right? Tod, a certain type of Hasidus. So on Shabbos, they have these orange, yellowish Bekishers, right? They have these what do you call it? Whatever these coats they wear. Yeah. Honoring Shabbos, right? So they say, oh, look, here come the penguins. They're like penguins sometimes. Okay. So if you're not Hasidish, you see a whole bunch of them. Okay, very good. Yeah. Now, should I be jealous? Should I have a chip on my shoulder? Say, oh, look, the penguins. Here come the penguins. That kind of making fun. Why would you make fun of that? Now, someone will say, I'll make fun of it because it looks funny. Okay. I don't have anything else in mind, right? If you're an Orthodox Jew, you shouldn't care, right? So what? They dress like this, someone else dress like that. Some wear a sputnik, some wear a certain type of strimal, some other wear a different type. Okay. Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. So you tell me, okay, so I'm going to go make fun of it because it looks funny. Okay. But in general, a secular Jew is not going to do it because it looks funny. They're not going to make fun of it because it looks funny. Why are they going to make fun of it? Why in general they're going to make fun of it? Because they have an issue with it. What's the issue that they have? The issue they have is they think, or you think, let's say better, they'll say, you think I'm not as religious. Well, you're not. That's pretty clear. Right? Or you think I'm not Jewish enough. I don't think anything either way. Right? You want to keep Shabbos, you don't want to keep Shabbos. It's your choice. You have absolute free choice. But if you want to put it down to say, do I think it's right what you do? No. I don't think it's right because the Torah says it's not right. So not a question of there's an issue with me. There could be many issues with me. Okay. But the issue over here is you have an issue with God. Period. That's the issue. By believing God. Well, maybe not the same way you do. Okay, I've heard that many times. Very good. I may not view the same way. Okay. But do you agree? If you're not going to agree with this, but is there a right way to do things or a wrong way to do things? Whatever you want. Can't do whatever you want. The Torah makes very clear. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. So what about what I want to do? Right? As we always say, nobody cares. No one gives a rat's tail what I want to do or not, or what I think or what I don't think. Nobody cares. What do they care about? What does God say? What does the Torah say? What do the rabbis say? So when people start making these type of statements, and that is the point, that's why I harped on it for so long, that is exactly the point. That's chinam. That's unlawful hatred. The reason it's unlawful, it's based on nothing. It's based on the person's inadequacy of themselves and how they think you may look at it. But it's their own inadequacy, right? It's their own inadequacy, how they deal with God and what they're supposed to do. And, oh, you think you're right. Yeah, I do. You want to know why? No. Why do you think you're right? Because this is what God says. And this is what we're supposed to do. Yeah, and if you intermarry and assimilate and this and that, Jews will disappear. That's what's going to happen. And that's what happened. 13.5 million Jews today don't know Aleph Beis, don't know Shema Yisrael. Yeah, intermarriage all-time high. Right? It's a disaster for Judaism. Not the way it should be. Okay, single biggest problem, as we always say, but I don't want to harp on that. Yeah, they have a chip on their shoulder, not you. You're not walking around with a chip on your shoulder. You're doing what you need to do. Guy, got to go to synagogue 3 times a day. You got to go. You got to keep these mitzvahs, those mitzvahs. Stay away from these things. Okay. You're not telling anyone else. You're not ramming it down their throat. Or here in Israel they would call it kfiyat datit, right? Religious coercion. Yeah, we want certain roads blocked off and major areas so people can't drive there. Okay, that's true. So secular Jews won't live there. Yeah. But all they want to do, secular Jews included, what do they want to do? They want to do whatever they want to do. They don't want to be told what to do. That's the bottom line. So they'll make fun of being brainwashed. I'm like, thank God. I told someone this almost had a heart attack. They're like, you admit being brainwashed? Yeah, being brainwashed by the Torah is the best thing could ever happen. Best thing that could ever happen. Secular Jews once came visit when I lived in a certain community. And they looked around. It's like, wow, this is like a ghetto. This is like a Jewish ghetto. I said, I know, it's great, isn't it? I was dropped dead of a heart attack. Yeah. How are you going to make Judaism strong if you don't live amongst Jews? If you don't live together. I mean, there are good things come with it. There are bad things potentially come with it. That's not the point. But you want to strengthen it. You want to strengthen it. And some people will run away from it. They don't have anything to do with it. Why? Because they don't be told what to do. Right? Even more important, they do not want to be inconvenienced. But you're not saying anything. You're not doing anything against these people. You dress a certain way, you do certain things. So why do they care? Why does it bother them? Yeah. So it's a similar thing. You look at the book of Esther, right? Purim right around the corner. Another week and a half or so. And not even. And Haman's got a lot of power, tremendous amount of power. Right? He's got, hundreds of kids, and a lot of them are dukes, and they all have money and power. So he's like situated very, very well. Everybody bows down to him, right? This new, idol worshiping cult called, Haman in that time walks in a room, everyone's got to get on the floor, right? Not everyone loved him for that reason, right? Because he abused it. He walked in a room, they all have to go on the floor. Walks out, comes back in, does a whole bunch of stuff. Like, they didn't enjoy it, so he's feeling good and smug and all that. Comes to the entrance of the palace of the king. Who does he see? None other than Mordecai. He sees Mordecai refuses to bow. So what's worth all his wealth? What's worth all his wealth? Wealth, power. So what does he do? He goes home, and Zeresh tells him, so he tells Zeresh this whole story, and she says, blaspheme against him to the king, put up these gallows and all that. Why does he want to kill him? Not only him and his whole people. Because his ego got hurt, or ego, as we would say here. His ego got hurt. His poor ego. Okay. The 99.9% of all people in that area, they bow down. One person won't bow. One will defy him. He says life isn't worth living. He's willing to give 750 tons at that time. 750 tons of silver to annihilate the Jewish people. You know what that amount of money is? It's like, you're talking billions of dollars. And Ahasuerus tells him, do what you want and save the money. I have a lot of money, so I don't need it. One Jew refuses to bow. What's the point? Why is this somewhat similar? Because he knows what the truth is. Right? He knows. First of all, he and Mordecai had a relationship before. He was actually a slave to Mordecai, without going into all the details. Yeah, what happened? He knows what the truth is. When he knows what the truth is, he can't stand the truth. Even if 99.999% of all people bow to him, whether they like it or not, they show the respect. They have to bow. Okay. One person won't bow. So what one person won't bow? But your ego's that inflated? Yes, it is. But he knows the truth. Once a person knows the truth, they can't stand anyone who thinks they have the truth. They have that truth. So for a secular Jew, in general, they'll make fun of it. And they'll say, oh, come on, you really believe in this? This and that. I said, have you ever studied it? Have you ever learned it? Have you ever thought about it? I had someone many years ago who asked this question to. Yeah. Do you think about God? No. Do you think about this? No. Do you think about meaning in life? No. I'm dead. Dead spiritually. Understand? Okay. Had certain difficulties in life, whatever. Okay. But you ever think about it? No. Why won't they think about it? Because they don't care. Doesn't impact their life. Okay, very good. Have they ever studied it properly? No. Now, if you tell me they studied it properly, they have evidence against it, whatever, okay. Then we can have a different discussion. But that's not the case. Not like they ever studied it, they wanted to study it. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is let me do what I want to do and keep your mouth shut. I don't want to feel guilty. I just want to do what I want to do. Yeah, that's unlawful hatred. That's hatred based on nothing. Right? That is the point. All right, let me take some questions here. One question is whether the person is continuing the harmful action. Okay, you do what you can to stop them. Yeah. If someone's doing harmful action, yeah, I don't have to ask the question and say, well, before I do anything, let me ask rabbinic supervision here. If the person's a mazik, let's say a person causing damage. You see someone on the road and they're driving like a maniac. Yeah, they're weaving in and out, this and that. You get close enough to see the license plate. Could you call them in? 100%. What if they're Jewish? So what? Yeah, you'll say, well, then you have the status of a moser. Moser is somebody who sort of tattletales on somebody, on a Jew, to the authorities, to secular authorities. Now, in this case, so someone who's a moser would lose their portion of the world to come. And these are the most despicable. A moser is really, we'll call them an informer. That's what they are. They're like informers. They're the most despicable people in the world because these people do anything, find favor, with the authorities, and the authorities want them to find, this person's a snitch, essentially. So he wants them to find things on other people, right? In order that, they get in trouble by the authorities. Very good. This person was like most despicable person, in the Jewish community. Yeah, so Moser loses a portion of the world to come. If he gets someone to court illegally, right, according to Torah, then he could seriously lose his portion of the world to come. But again, in this case, someone is a maniac. Someone is weaving in and out, could potentially cause severe damage. Yeah, it caused a big accident, let's say. Right now, is the person have to ask a question on that? No. You get the license plate, you turn the person in. Right? They are considered a menace to society. A menace to society, don't ask questions. You do not ask any questions. Yeah. So if they're continuing, you can take them to courts. Take them to Basin if they're Jewish. If they're not Jewish, you can take them to secular court. Okay. Right? But so the question is they're causing harmful damage. They're continuing to cause harmful damage. So we always say you hate the act and not the person. It's gonna be hard to not to hate the person, isn't it? It's gonna be almost impossible to hate the person. But the Torah says you can't hate a person in your heart. So the person would say, I don't know, it's a murderer, it's a pedophile, it's done other things. I have to love them? No. That far you don't have to go. That far you don't have to go. But the Torah said you got to love every person in your heart. With a reason. Someone continues to do damage. Yeah, you can totally hate the act, but if they're causing you serious damage, it's going to be very hard to love them. Right? Or let's say better. Forget loving them. It's going to be very hard not to hate them. Yeah, now, is God going to put you in a situation where he's going to say, nope, you got to love them. You can't hate them. Let's say better. You can't hate them. Person's caused you unbelievable pain. So you can say, well, I thought about the bigger picture. I thought about all these things. And I understand God's using this person as a stick to get to me. Beautiful. All these things are true. But they're causing you unbelievable pain. So is God going to expect the person that's causing you unbelievable pain not to hate them? I would find it incredulous that a person would be punished in such a case. Or if they cause the trauma, even better. Right? Someone's raped, pedophile. Yeah. You know, love the person and not hate them? I can't imagine. I can't imagine God going to say, hey, you should have loved this person. Or at least, the very least, you shouldn't have hated them. Yeah, I did it to you because whatever reason. This is what your soul had to go through. I don't know. Whatever it is. God can say, yeah, I had it happen because of X, Y, and Z. But I expected better from you. Is God going to really say that? I can't imagine. It's trauma. It's a major trauma. Not to hate the person. You'd have to be an absolute, biggest righteous person in the world, right? For that. God's not expecting that, right? I'll take responsibility for that. God is not going to expect it at all. Be impossible. Be impossible for someone to do it, right? God's not going to put someone in an impossible situation. It's impossible, right? If someone did that, let's say, the Messiah already would have come. That would have been enough. That would have been enough for the Messiah to come. That's an impossibility. God can't expect that. Cannot expect that. So if the person is continue to cause harmful damage, and they're not going to change, and they're rotten to the core, so you can hate them. You can absolutely hate them. Yeah. I don't see how someone won't. But first, you can't hate a Jew in your heart. You have to hate the action. Good. To hate the action's easy. That is the easiest thing. Right? But not to hate the person, that's going to be very hard. So it depends. Right? If the person continues doing terrible things, who says you have to hate? You're not allowed to hate them. Even though Torah says you can't hate, but I mean within reason. This is within reason. Person continues to do damage, causing all kinds of pain. Doesn't care. Evil incarnate, let's say. You're not allowed not to hate them? And just the act, that'd be very hard. Right? I would think it'd be impossible for someone to be able to overcome that. Now, again, if a person had the ability to overcome it, they don't. That's a different issue, but I can't imagine. That's going to be part of the equation here. Someone says, hypothetically speaking, person stands up for his right to learn Torah against the attacker. And then he reported him to base and has to apologize and threaten his conversion. So that's wrong. Obviously, that's wrong. In other words, the person came to base and let's say hypothetically, person came to base and, squealed on someone because they got attacked. If it's verified, if it's verified to be true, and the basin threatens them with that, it's wrong. The basin's corrupt. Absolutely the basin's corrupt. Right? There was a case. I heard from the person themselves. I don't know fully the case, but a child was raped, pedophile, and they called it in. People in the community pressure. Yeah, they got a lot of pressure from the community. What are you doing? You got to take away this person's livelihood, different things. This person's a menace. This person's a menace. Yeah. Now, again, it's verified. It happened. But it wasn't the first time it happened. Yeah, and they try and cover it up. So this person had no choice. They had no choice. They got harassed so much from people in the community. So they left. I don't know what happened to this person's son or whatever, but they left. They left the community. Now, isn't that horrific? The community is sticking up for a pedophile. Again, all things being equal, he's guilty. Nothing to talk about, right? Absolutely guilty. Absolutely guilty. How can they cover that up? How can they arrest the person? Understand, you gotta say this guy's livelihood's in trouble. Look what he did. You should not be teaching kids, period. And you have people like that. Yeah. They should be covered up for. Okay, you got to investigate. Every kid. Now, sometimes kid is lying. Kid could be absolutely lying. Yeah, so you got to investigate. Right? If it's corroborated that's a lie, okay. Yeah, that's also happened. Doesn't happen enough times. But you have to take it seriously. And you have to investigate it. Yeah? And if it's investigated, let's say, and it's found out to be true, A, the person go to jail. B, should never be allowed to work with kids, period. Cover it up. That's a problem. Harass the people because of what they did. Again, this is what happened. right? This is the person telling the story. So what they do, they couldn't live in such a community. So they move. So you tell me, but isn't that wrong? Yes. 100% is wrong. They shouldn't have to move. They should be commended for taking the bull by the horns, and that this person should never teach again, at least not teach little kids or whatever. Yeah, that's what should be done, period. That's what should be done. But the fact that they get harassed, and then they have to move, but that's what the person did. Felt they had no choice, couldn't live there. Right? So he moved. But again, these allegations, let's call them, have to be taken seriously. Now, if they're false allegations, okay. I know someone else was investigated for something, and it's also it's false. But the person had to make a public statement, whatever, until things got cleared. Now, obviously, it's not good having something hang over your head. People think, oh, maybe they did it, maybe they didn't, whatever. But anyway, this person was exonerated. Yeah, they made it up. They had a vendetta, I guess. What this person had said, or maybe some things that they said, I don't know, whatever it may be. But it was clear in the end that they had an agenda. They had let's say better, they had a vendetta, right? And they were found out to be lying. Okay, right? So person's got to be careful no matter what they do. But something of that magnitude, they have to investigate. Yeah, and it should be called it. Yeah, 100% it should be called it. But you have to do a thorough investigation to see. And there are people, yeah, they abuse power. No question about it. And there were serious repercussions. Very serious repercussions. But it had to be investigated. Something like that, you don't say, wow, this person's a moser. This person is like an informer. You got to investigate. Yeah. And there are things that you don't wait to ask questions. Things have been done, and let's say to a number of people. But it's corroborated by a number of people. Yeah. So then, it has to be investigated. And if they find out what they say is true, that person's in trouble. Now again, could it be a vendetta? Could be. Very well could be a vendetta. Yeah, but you got to investigate it. Yeah, and now if it's true, then it's true. If it's not true, the person's exonerated. You can tell me damage has been done. Depends. It definitely depends. But if if the person is exonerated, so to speak, then 100%, right? But that's not called a moser over here. That's not called turning someone in, being an informant for the wrong reason. This is for the right reason. You have an obligation. 100%, you have an obligation to do it. Yeah. But again, in this hypothetical case, if someone turned someone in and this person was guilty, yeah, and even so, Basin's going to turn around and say, wow, that shouldn't have been done. We're going to stop your conversion for a year. That'd be, corruption at a very high level. Yeah, in theory. Right? If that was done. Suits are not Jewish, non-Jews wear them and invented them too. Okay, so why did Jews wear it? Yeah. Why don't we wear what we wear? Because the clothing shows respect. That's what it does. Regardless of where it came from. You can tell me it came from secular thing. Okay. Yeah. But a person definitely feels different when they wear a suit and when they don't. You can say what you want, how it started, and all that doesn't really matter. Right? If someone's wearing jeans or let's say cotton pants and a shirt, I guarantee they're not feeling the same as if they're wearing a suit. Now you can tell me there are people who don't like to wear suits. Okay. They don't like to wear suits. Very good. Is wearing a suit more formal or less formal? You'll say, well, society says. I don't care what society says. Is it more formal or less formal? It's more formal. Yeah. What does more formal mean? What does it mean to dress up? I'm not saying, I think there are plenty of people dress up just for the sake of making money. Yeah. You work on Wall Street. I don't know if it's still the same today or not. You wear a single-breasted suit, double-breasted suit. That's what you wear because you're working on Wall Street. Okay. But they're doing it for money. Doing it for prestige, let's say. Right? But again, why are they dressing up? Okay, in that case, dressing up for money. Why would we dress up in general? For the sake of God. That's a big difference. Told someone this, they were fuming. I said, what's the first thing? I mentioned this thing about, working on Wall Street, whatever. This person happened to, whatever, was working for a finance company. So I said, why do people dress up? Single-breasted suit, double-breasted suit. I said, for money. That's what the job dictates to dress. I'm not necessarily big into externals, but that's why they'll dress up that way. So the person got a little bit, let's say, hot under the collar. Hot under the collar as some might. Yeah, they get hot under the collar. Now, why would that be? Well, so the person said, okay, very good. Very good. Why do they do what they do? Why do you do what you do? Why do you dress that way? What's the answer? What was my answer? Because that's what God wants. Again, if you're Orthodox, you're not going to dress that way. Okay. Yeah. But there is a difference the way you dress. Very serious difference. Very, very serious difference. If that is the case, yeah, you feel different the way you dress. Okay. You feel different. So regardless of who invented it or not, doesn't really matter. What matters is the fact the way a person dresses, period. Are they dressing more formal or less formal? More formal shows more respect. I would say. Again, not everyone will agree. People can say I can dress the way I want. I don't. Who says I have to wear? Who determines I gotta wear black and white? I can wear a white shirt, black pants with all pinstripes or whatever. Whoever dictates it, okay, you don't have to like it. Good. You want to identify with a certain community, you dress that way. If not, you won't. Yeah. A person wants to be more modern Orthodox, very good. So dress the way you want. Right? I'm pointing out, is there a difference the way a person dresses and the way they feel? Yes. There's a very big difference. Right? A person say, I don't like to dress so formal. Okay. They don't like to dress so formal. Very good. Yeah, it's your own issue. But is there a difference the way a person should feel when they dress that way or not? There should be. Yeah, you're making a statement. You're making a statement. I come from God, I should be dressed this way. Again, a person doing work around their house or apartment, whatever, you're not going to dress exactly that way. Why? You want to ruin pants, so you have pants that or you have attire that you're wearing in order to fix things or whatever, so you don't get the other stuff dirty. Okay, that's a different issue. When it comes to pray and do other things, the way you want to be seen, that you dress a certain way. A person likes it or not, that's what it is. So does the person feel different the way they dress? Absolutely. They for sure feel different. They should feel different. Yeah, again, a person can decide, I don't want to dress that way, and I don't identify with that community. Okay. So a person's going to dress the way that community dresses, for better or for worse. Otherwise, just stick out. Now, if there are different elements in that community, very good. There are different elements. If there are different elements, then what? If there are different elements, then good. So there's not one way to dress in a community. Okay. So that's different than if one community dresses more or less the same. Because if you're going to buck that system, go move somewhere else. Right? If you want to fit in, you dress the way everyone dresses. If you have a mixture of communities within one community, okay, that's a different issue. Right? That's a different issue. But you want to dress the way you feel, the way other people around you dress. You want to fit in as much as possible. Right? So you dress that way, whether you like it or not. So figure out what type of community you feel comfortable in. You dress appropriately or not. Maybe they're attacking you because deep inside they want to be close as God as you. No, they're interested, right? In this case, right, I can think of a lot of cases. It's not interested in being close to God. That's not their issue. They want to do what they want to do, period. Yeah. They're doing exactly what they want to do, right? Their main thing is you've been brainwashed, which is not a bad thing, right? But their main thing is I want to do what I want to do. That's it. They don't want to be subservient to anything except what their heart tells them. That's what they want. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to be told what to eat. They don't want to be told where to go, how to dress. That's the issue. Right? That's the issue. It's not a question of being closer to God. If it be a question of being closer to God, then that's a different discussion. Then why do you have to dress this way? Why can't you do it this way? Why can't you do it the other way? That's not a question. That's not a question. They're not asking that question. Yeah, they have a whole totally different agenda. What's the agenda? I want to do what I want to do. That's it. That's their agenda. That is their agenda. So if that's their agenda, guess what? It's not about religion, right? Not about being closer to God. That I can tell you. Over the years of all these stupid statements, over the years, that has not changed. Yeah, their closest to God has not changed from what I've seen. Because if the question of being closer to God, then they'd be asking different questions. But that's not the question. So we can agree to disagree, live and let live. That's not an answer. They just want to do what they want to do. Yeah. Now, if they would say, well, I think this, and me being close to God, however, I think it's like, okay, that's a different issue. That's a very different issue. That conversation never happened. And it won't happen. I mean, it's not going to happen. Yeah, why? Because they don't care. That's not the issue. For them, that's not the issue. It's not the issue at all. If that is not the issue, then what is the issue? And the issue is they don't want to be inconvenienced. That's the issue. So whatever they do, or not do is based on whatever they think. It's based on convenience, bottom line. Because they want to do too much, maybe they'll do something, maybe this, okay. But it's not based on truth. It's not based on all what my heart tells me, and you like to do this, I like to do that. Okay, but that means they've never given the thoughts. They've never given the thought what may be true or not true. And I tell you, and so now I'll back it up. How do I know that's true? How do I know that's true? Because in the last 32 years or more, yeah, more than that, really, no one's ever asked the question, why'd you change your life? That question never came up in the last 32 years or more. Now, why didn't it come up? What's the simple reason it didn't come up? Because they don't care. They don't care. You chose this, someone else chose that, whatever it is, okay. But why did it never come up? Because they don't care. That's one reason. Second reason is because if it would come up, and you, whoever it is, has what to say, right? They have what to say about why they did it and what it means and life having meaning. They don't want that conversation. They're not interested in that conversation. Why not? Because what if you actually say something? First of all, they're afraid you're going to get brainwashed. Right? That you are going to brainwash them. I remember having a conversation many, many years ago with a couple cousins, and someone makes a comment and says, don't convert them. Yeah. Now they were Jewish, and this is before I was even dealing with non-Jews. Yeah. Don't convert them. What do they mean? Don't make them like you. Don't brainwash them. That's what someone said. So we're having this animated conversation, yeah? So I told them, I said, it's going to be impossible. So they were taken aback. They're like, what do you mean? So how is that going to be impossible? I said, because I'm not talking about religion. This is actually about basketball. Maybe you call basketball religion. I don't know. they're like, don't brainwash them. Don't convert them to the way, you are. I said, I'm not. I'm speaking about sports. Why would they make such a statement? Oh, they were young kids at the time. Yeah, under the age of 10 for sure. Yeah. What was I going to say in that amount of time to convince them to keep Torah mitzvahs? Nothing. Zero. So what does someone make the statement for? Yeah. What does someone make the statement for? Because they don't want to be brainwashed. Because they think you've been brainwashed. Yeah, me, let's say. Again, thank God that's been the case. Yeah, for good. They don't want their kids or grandkids being brainwashed. They don't want them to learn too much about their own religion. But in either case, I wasn't speaking about that. I was speaking about sports. Basketball, to be specific. But that was the topic. Topic had nothing to do with religion. Zero to do with religion. So that's a good thing over here. That's a good proof. Why? What are they afraid of? What are they afraid of this interaction? What do they think religious Jews are going to do? The only thing they care about is that their kids, grandkids, or whatever shouldn't be too religious. We'll do a little bit here, a little bit there, very good. If not, do what you want. But don't be too religious. Why are they afraid of religion? Why are they afraid of it? Because they don't want to have responsibility. They want to do what they want to do. That's it. That's what they want. More than anything else, that's what they want. Nothing more, nothing less. They do not want to be told what to do. That's it. That's what they want. So that's why somebody in that context would say, don't convert them. Right? Same person, by the way, made a statement, a few years ago. They had a grandchild, and actually in Israel. And not that I ever spoke to them or saw them, but anyway, they were very happy they didn't stay there. Yeah, they're ecstatic. Okay, they went there for a couple of years, whatever it was, got certain, training, whatever it was. Okay, now back on American soil. Why is it important that they're back on American soil? Because the person said, as long as they don't get brainwashed like you. That's what they said. Yeah. We already lost one, we don't want to lose any more. Now, I understand where that comes from to a certain point. But a lot of people think, yeah, been brainwashed. They don't want to see anyone else get lost in Israel and get brainwashed the same way. That's what they said. I had plenty of what to say on that. Guess what I said? Zero. What are they afraid of? They're afraid if they were exposed to actually the truth. What are they afraid of? What's the answer? They don't want change. They don't want to see change. Not interested in change. They want to do, as we said before, whatever they want to do. That's it. That's what they want. They do not want to be told what to do. It's going to mess everything up. All of a sudden now you can't take these kids out for dinner, for lunch. You can't call them on Shabbos. They won't answer the phone. It's inconvenient. Extremely inconvenient. Yeah. Not about truth. Nobody's asking about truth. They're not interested. think this person is ever going to ask the question? They live that long. They're ever gonna ask the question. So why'd you change? Tell us the truth. What made you change? Now, most people, they weren't shocked how it turned out. Certainly not. Right? I think I went too far. Okay. But like it was like a natural progression in that sense. But like, okay, it's good for you, not for I don't want for other people. So I won't be able to call them on Shabbos. I won't be able to take them out for dinner. It's inconvenient. Not about truth. Zero about truth. Yeah, what did Bernard Shaw say? They attribute it to him, famous writer. 1% think, 4% think they think, 95% rather die than think. So who's thinking today? Nobody's thinking. I'm saying nobody, but a lot of people are not thinking. Because I want to think, because if they think, and they really think, then maybe they have to change. As we said before, they have no interest to change. Zero interest. Everything's relative, someone there says, returns belief, that's all things people run around yoga clothing, blah, blah, blah. Secular Jew or Gentile, it's called a lifestyle. They call it a lifestyle, yeah. What did you be obedient to Hashem's standards? Then you're being a religious fanatic. Yeah. Or someone said, when my kids were younger, so you stop them from, let's say drinking milk after eating meat. Yeah, so really you have to wait 6 hours. But for a kid, it could be 3 hours. When they get older, it could be 4 hours, whatever, gradually. Someone says, secular Jew says this, and says, but it's a bad example for your kids. Sorry, not a bad example. You're making your kids suffer. Making them suffer? Why am I making them suffer? Because they want, they want to drink milk after eating meat. Well, you know what? The Torah says you can't do that. The Torah says you can't cook a calf in its mother's milk. It's forbidden. So you're not allowed to. Yeah. Now, by a child, depends how old the child is. Baby, you could do that. 3-year-old, you could potentially do that. Child education starts at the age of 5 or 6. So if child education starts by the age of 5 or 6, guess what? You got to educate them. Now they're saying that's an act of cruelty. That's education, right? That's Jewish education. That's not fanaticism. You're denying them. That's for education. No, I'm educating them. They have to be able to wait. By certain ages, they have to wait a certain time, a certain amount of time. Okay. Very good. But you got to educate them. They're saying that's cruel. Separation of milk and meat is cruel. Torah doesn't give me a reason why. It doesn't matter. Why you're not allowed to eat milk and meat. But, you have an obligation to separate your children from something forbidden. So why is that cruel? Right? They'll say, oh, that's, I can't believe that. How could they let a child not eat a certain amount of time, whatever? That's cruel. That's fanaticism. Okay, so now we got new definitions for Torah. Right? Fanaticism. Kashrus is fanaticism. Kashrus is anti-pork. Kashrus is, anti-non-Jew. Kashrus is a lot of different things. Okay? Kashrus is a lot of different things. Very good. That's cruel. That's fanaticism, so to speak. Right? Someone here says, very good. Problem is, you can have your own lifestyle on your own terms. That's right. There's a right, wrong. There's a right way to do things, wrong way to do things. It's not about what I want to do. As we said before, nobody cares what I want to do. Nobody cares what I think. It's what God thinks. What God wants. Right? To be obedient, not popular. It's not even not popular. Being obedient is being what? Closed-minded. Being obedient is called being a fanatic. Being obedient means, next thing you know, you're going to make me, wear a burqa and shave my head. Right? They don't know the extent of it, but they don't want to go too far. Because they see what happens when people are religious. Yeah, they can do all kinds of crazy things. Okay. Who says Judaism's a part of that? But again, someone will say, that's the way it looks. Who cares the way it looks? The question is, how is it understood? Right? So on the outside, yeah, it looks kind of strange. Okay? It looks kind of strange. So, so that goes to the next question. Why do so many ultra-Orthodox Jews wear black? What does black represent? That nothing to do with mourning, it's about humility. I would say it's about humility, not mourning the temple. Yeah. Mourning the temple, you wear sackcloth and other things, right? But not necessarily black. I mean, you could wear black for mourning, but black or dark colors are seen more in modest terms. That's what I would say. That's the way I think it's looked at. Yeah. So, it's humility, modesty. Some say it is mourning for destruction of the temple. All right. Could be. I don't think it's why most people are wearing it, but I think that would be the case. But it's not necessarily for mourning. Could be. I don't think so. Right? It's more out of respect, and it's more out of what's the word? It's more out of it's more out of humility, I think, more than anything else. Now, some do mention it has to do with destruction of the temple. I don't think that's the case, though. I don't think that's the case, though. I think it's more out of humility, modesty. Obviously it's different than wearing something very colorful. Yeah, I think it's definitely different than that. Right, that you'd stick out more. People are going to look at you more. You'll stand out because it's very bright. So something that's not very bright, you mix in with everyone else. You're not looked at. So it's more for, I would say, modesty and humility. No one thinks another's thought. Okay, very good. No one thinks another's thought. We're all different. Nobody, and a person can say, "Well, you don't know what I'm thinking right now." Very good. Yeah, no one knows what someone else is thinking. Okay. I would say though that people judge. I'm not saying it's right, but they judge other people the way they dress and the way they look. Now, there's some people, let's say, don't dress the part. Let's say, guy won't wear a kippah, yarmulke, or whatever, but he's very traditional. Well, doesn't work on Shabbos, keep Shabbos, whatever. But you wouldn't tell by the way they dress. Right? So, you can't necessarily make assumptions. It's very easy to. Right? But you can't necessarily make assumptions by the way somebody dresses. Because on the other hand, someone could dress the part, walk the walk, and talk the talk, and guess what? They're not very religious. They could very well not be religious. On the inside. They could just be going through the motions or dressing that part for whatever reason, but they're not really that religious. That can happen. Right? On the other hand, you can see people that not dress the part and are more religious in some ways. Right? So you can't necessarily go by how people dress. But again, people will take me to task for this and they'll say, you don't know what a person thinks. You're right. I never claim to know what a person thinks. I can make assumptions. I could be wrong. Been wrong about, plenty of things. Could be wrong. Yeah. But my assumption is that they dress a certain way, and they go, let's say, to a certain type of synagogue, I could assess different things. Now, it could be wrong. You 100% could be wrong. You don't know all the facts. You're right. Right? But my guess would be because of who they associate with, what type of synagogue they associate with, I can make certain assumptions. Now, again, are all those assumptions going to be true? No. Not necessarily going to be true. But I think a lot of them will be, right? Again, I'll give one example I always give. Someone tells me, in certain places you have to have tickets to go to the services for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So someone says, the more I pay, the closer I get to the air conditioning. Okay. So I told them, I said, I got a great idea. Why don't you just buy a portable and bow down to it? They're like, you're very cynical. I said, I know. But I said, they said, why would you say such a thing? At least I go to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. That's good. Yeah, potentially. But if a person makes a statement, again, just analyze the statement. The statement is the more money we pay, the closer we get to the AC. So now, if you're in synagogue to pray, that's what you should be doing. What does it matter if you're close to the AC or not? Does the AC really matter? In the bigger scheme of things and why you're there to pray. I don't think it mentions anywhere, when a person prays in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, anything about air conditioning. Pretty confident, doesn't say anything about air conditioning in any prayer book. So are you there to pray or are you there for the AC? Yeah. So say you don't know what's in someone's heart. You're right. But if someone makes that statement, what are they telling you? What's more important? What's more important is this thing called air conditioning. The most important thing? I don't know if the most important thing, but that's what they said. They may be there because they like the rabbi's sermons. Okay. They didn't say that. They said the more we pay, the closer we get to the AC. Now, it could be maybe the more spiritually inclined, they just happen to say these are more expensive because people like to get close to the AC. I don't know. Whatever it is. I can make a lot of assumptions. Probably some of them are wrong. Granted. Maybe some of them are wrong. Okay. Yeah. But you'll say, well, you shouldn't be making assumptions. Okay. But if someone makes a statement like that, that's kind of a stupid thing. But someone makes a statement like that, well, I think in general, I think in general, then you are saying something or not saying something. Yeah. Now again, is everything we're going to say against them? Is it all true? Maybe some of it. I think some of it's for sure going to be true, right? You can't make, in general, you don't make assumptions, but someone makes a statement like that, how should it be interpreted? So you say, well, you should be happy that they go to synagogue. Okay, maybe. Yeah, it depends what they get out of it. Someone asks, what's happening in the Western Wall? The mechitza being demolished. They're trying to. Got the women of the wall trying to, make sure, stir up trouble to make sure that, there is no separation at the wall. I don't think it'll be too successful, but whatever, they make a lot of noise. They do, it's a small group. It's kind of funny though, in a certain way, because you think like, they represent so many people. They're a small group. They're a small, they're a small group. And if you would ask, the reform movement in general, ask people in the reform movement, what are the 10 biggest problems? 10 biggest problems facing the reform movement today. I guarantee, with all the money I don't have, I would guarantee this question of separation at the Western Wall is not in the top 10. Pretty sure it's probably not going to be in the top 10. Why am I so sure? Because I guarantee most Reform Jews don't know anything about it. Most likely. Again, they're making waves. Why are they making waves? They want to power. They want a certain level of power, right? They want to change the established status quo, right? That's what they're into. They have no power here. They have very little power here. Yeah, which is good. Yeah, so basically, secular Jews will say, the synagogue I don't pray in is Orthodox, because they know what the truth is. Reform and conservative never really had established inroads here. I mean, they have stuff here, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's very significant. Again, they're always trying to make it more significant, more relevant, but a lot of their constituents don't even care. They don't even care what happens here, and probably most of them never been here. Right? Which is even more mind-boggling. Yeah, most American Jews have not been to Israel. It's a mind-boggling thing. Mind-boggling thing. Yeah. But again, it's not on their agenda. Totally not on their agenda. They're living the life rightly outside the land. What do they need Israel for? There's no connection to it. But again, to answer your question, are they trying to separate? Yeah. They're trying to get rid of the separation. Trying to make waves, and hopefully that won't be the case. Right? Hopefully status quo is going to stay. Secular force in this country will do what they can to try and stop it. But ultra-Orthodox, for better or for worse, they got a lot of power. Tremendous amount of power. The secular are afraid of them. For the next 20, 30 years, most kids in Jerusalem will be Orthodox. The next 20, 30 years. So for secular Jews, that's a scary proposition. Very scary proposition. The other Orthodox only 10%, give or take, 10% of the Jewish population. Especially here, it's only about 10%, right? But the secular are not having kids, right? Or, have almost negative birth rate. And other Orthodox Jews have 6, 7, 8 kids, right? Average probably 6, right? So, they can overcome them at some point. Right? At some point, that's going to be the case. And it's terrifying to them. Makes sense. Right? It's one of the reasons, by the way, they imported all these non-Jewish Russians knowing that they were non-Jews to offset that. And they made that clear. Secular political people, whatever, made that very clear. That's why they did it. So, change the status quo, these other things. Someone had a great idea, by the way, just throw this out there. Someone had a great idea on this, really left-wing politicians, came up with this great idea for conversion, right? And for a lot of people, probably a good idea. My problem is it's totally forbidden. He had this idea, I don't even know what it means, but he had this idea called a secular conversion. Now, what does a secular conversion mean? I studied a little bit math, a little bit Jewish history, maybe Israeli history, right? And then you become Israeli, you become Jewish. What does that mean? It's a total oxymoron, right? It was about religion and about God. What does that do with secularism? Nothing, right? Anyway, it never passed, but he had this great idea. I don't even know what any of the points are. It just sounds stupid. If conversion is supposed to be about religion being close to God, how can you secularize it? What secular things you put in there? Got to kiss the Israeli flag? Do the army? How far does it go? It's a silly thing. But secular are very secular. So they want what they want. They want things to be easier. They don't want ultra-Orthodox Jews to monopolize Torah. They also know what Torah is, they think. They want to be more lenient, more this, more that. It is ironic sometimes that you have people, they don't understand anything, right? They don't know anything. And there are times they'll use what we'll call Talmudic dictums to prove their point. And if a person has learned anything in their lives, even a little bit, they're out of their league. They never should make statements, right? To say, well, if I have two opinions, I can go according to the winning opinion. You want to clarify that? You want to tell me what cases it is? Cases, you had Hillel and Shammai. Well, very good. Most of the cases between Hillel and Shammai, we go according to Hillel. In the end of days, we'll go according to Shammai. But at the moment, we go according to Hillel. Okay. So in this case, I get, and they sometimes bring up such a comparison, and it's someone, we'll give an example. It's like someone who knows the times tables and you're trying to explain to them physics. It's not going to go. It's not going to go. So they sound like absolute ignoramuses, right? You don't have to be the biggest rabbinic scholar to see it, right? But if a person knows anything in Torah, they just laugh. They're you're bringing this up. Has no context. There's no context at all. But they'll bring it up to say, oh, see, we know a little bit of Torah. No, you don't. Just admit you don't, right? But don't make stupid comparisons, right? And they just sound silly. They sound absolutely silly. Helping your child avoid indigestion. It's not about indigestion. It's not about indigestion. It's about mixing milk and meat, right? It's about having milk, 10 minutes after eating milk, eating meat, or 20 minutes, not eating together. I'm not talking about eating them together. I'm talking about eating milk products right after meat, not the other way around, right? It has nothing to do with indigestion. You're eating one after the other. You've already digested one. You've already eaten. Let's say, I don't know, person was eating a burger, eating a steak, whatever, right? Your kid had a piece of meat, and now, after they had this meat, they want to have milk. They want to have cheese, let's say. We're not talking about eating at the same time. And even if they were eating at the same time, it's not a problem with digestion, right? They're not stuffing their face, right? Take a little piece of meat and put cheese on it. Then what's the problem with digestion? That has nothing to do with indigestion. It has to do with the fact it's forbidden to eat milk and meat together. Why would that be called cruel? That's my point. Why is that cruel? You're teaching them Torah mitzvahs. Very good. That's Torah mitzvahs. That's not cruel. You're denying the child. You're right. Why? Because the Torah says you got to educate your kid. And they can't eat milk and meat together or one after the other. You can't eat, let's say better, you can't eat any milk product after eating meat straight away. Right? The kid's, over the age of 5. Got to educate them. They got to wait 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is. They got to wait. That's not being cruel. I'm not talking, again, that has nothing to do with digestion. Zero to do with digestion. Right? It's one after the other. Someone asked, could hidden tzaddik associate with the biggest not yet tzaddikim? Why not? Right? Someone who's righteous that nobody knows. There are 36 righteous people in every generation. Let's say you have some that are hidden. Nobody knows that they're righteous. Yeah, nobody knows. Could they associate with the biggest not yet righteous people? Why not? They probably won't because they don't want to be found out. If they're hidden, if they're righteous and they're hidden, that means somebody knows who they are. Right? They're not going to associate with people that can get exposed. That's exactly the point. They don't want to be in the limelight. They don't want people to know how much they know. Yeah, they absolutely don't want people to know how much they know. So therefore, if they, even someone who's not yet righteous or truly righteous, right? In other words, they're not the biggest of the righteous, but if they know something, they have knowledge, they're going to know this person knows a lot, right? That would defeat the purpose. That would totally defeat the purpose because they don't want to be known, right? They want to be hidden. That's the whole point. They want to be hidden. So they wouldn't hang out with these type of people, even if they're not really the biggest righteous people right now. Someone says, I heard secular government and this will make it very hard for Orthodox Americans to just make Aliyah. I don't know about that. Can someone pretend they converted by the reform and get Israel for the sake of making it easier? They could. They absolutely could. I'm not telling people to do it. Right? They can come on the law of return. Right? As long as even if they have a bogus conversion. Yeah, what I would call a bogus conversion. Then could they come back on the right of return? Yes. They had a reform conversion, conservative conversion, I don't know, reconstructionist conversion, whatever it is. Could they come back on the law of return? Yes. Because it's, could somebody, let's throw this question out there fully, could somebody have a false conversion or a bogus conversion, I'll call it? Could they have a bogus conversion in order to come to Israel, make it easier for them to convert? Yes. Will it be easier for them to convert? Right? Sorry. Will it be easier for them to come to Israel and then go through a proper conversion? Yes. It would make Aliyah much easier. Coming to Israel much easier. That is 100% true. Now, someone's going to ask, would you tell people to do it? Absolutely not. I wouldn't tell people to do it. Yeah. Is it easier to do it that way? Yes. 100% it's easier to do it that way. Should somebody do it? They can do what they want. Yeah, they can make their own choice. Right? Someone's going to pin me down and say, would you tell people to do it? Absolutely not. I make it very clear. You want to do it, it's your choice. Right? Making life easier for the sake of coming to Israel, yes. That's a lot easier. So it definitely is a lot easier. Yeah. Would I tell people to do it? No. Wouldn't tell people to do it, but it's true. It definitely is easier. When the Messiah would come, everyone would have to make Aliyah, right? Everyone's going to have to come. Whoever survives, right? They're going to have to come to Israel. I heard Rebel Wine, bless the memory, who was a rabbi in Miami many, many years ago. He lived his last years in, what do they call it, in Israel, in Jerusalem. It's recently passed away, whatever, a number of months ago. Any case, he was living in Miami, and he was giving a class, I guess, speaking about the Messiah coming, whatever, and coming to Israel. So one of the people there said, Rabbi, that's great. People want to come to Israel. The Messiah comes, says, I'm not interested. Said Messiah comes, he goes, I'm going straight to Miami Beach. That's what he says. I'm going straight to Miami Beach. So Rabbi Wine said, and he meant it. He meant it. This guy meant it. Yeah. So yeah, when the Messiah comes, all Jews are going to have to go to Israel, right? Whoever survives, yeah. They're going to have to go to Israel. And someone can tell me, it's too cold in the winter and this and that. I said, so you wear an extra sweater. It's like, no, but I can't really imagine, whatever, not so interested. I said, at that point, it's not going to matter. He said, why? I said, because you won't have an evil inclination, right? If you should survive at that point, you're not going to have an evil inclination, so you want to go anyway, so it won't matter. That was my answer. Yeah, but every Jew is going to have to come, right? Every Jew is going to have to come. Someone says, I told the secular guy being cruel, send his child up to transgress Torah, but they don't care. That's the whole thing. They don't care. That's not being cruel. Right? They say, I don't believe the Torah is true. I don't believe the Torah is true. But again, this person's coming from the vantage point of I never want to be inconvenienced in life. They don't want to see people become inconvenienced. So I usually see children or grandchildren being inconvenienced. They can only eat certain things at a certain time and this and that. Okay. That's being cruel. Yeah, you can make that argument. It's not going to go anywhere. Right? You can say, but that's cruel because you're going against the Torah. It's like, what do I care? But, I don't believe in the Torah that way that you do. It's not going to be an answer to them. Right? Their answer is never be inconvenienced. That's their answer. Never be inconvenienced. You should never inconvenience your kids. Well, it's not true. Yeah. Kids will be inconvenienced. Things they don't want to do. Okay. They will be inconvenienced. And it could have nothing to do with religion. But they can be inconvenienced. But this person does not want to be inconvenienced ever. So they see that's cruel. That's cruel what you're doing to your child. The easy answer would be, well, who's more important over here? God or you? You think it's an inconvenience. You think it's, sorry, let's say better. You think it's cruel. Okay. God says, this is what I told you to do. I told you not to mix milk and meat. Very good. Not only I told you to do it, but you have also an obligation to educate your children. Since you have an obligation to educate your children, very good. You got to start at a certain point, certain time. So what does it come down to? What's the bottom line? Bottom line is it's no true or it's not true. Yeah. If it's true, then I have to do what God says. So I think the Torah is written by man. Okay. You think the Torah is written by man. So what do? What mitzvahs do we keep? What mitzvahs don't we keep? So again, it comes down bottom line. Is it true or not true? And if it's true, what do I have to do? So someone said, even if you prove it's true, I don't have to keep it. So then there's no argument. You don't have any argument because even if you convince them, they said, you can convince me, but I don't have to do it. Well, if I convince you, why not? Why are you going to tell me you don't have to do it if you're convinced? Because I don't want to do it. Again, it's the same thing. I don't want to be inconvenienced. That's the bottom line. but they're not even going to engage in that conversation. Because you're talking apples and oranges, even if you could prove to them beyond the shadow of a doubt. Now, the question they could be, okay, you prove to me. There's a God. Okay. So why do you say the Torah is true? What about, Islam, Christianity, anything? Okay, good. That's a different discussion. But you won't get past that. Most people are not that open-minded. You're not going to get past that discussion, usually. You might, depends how open-minded they are, but they're not going to have that discussion. Why aren't they going to have that discussion? Because they don't want it. But again, if someone's going to tell you, you can prove it to me, I don't have to keep it, then what's the point? Then if they admit, now imagine, let's say the person admits what you're saying is probably true. Yeah, what's God going to say? How's God going to view it? My guess would be he's not going to be too happy, in one sense, right? On one hand, he's going to say, wow, they admitted that I might actually exist and that might actually be true. Okay, where's the follow-through? Where's the follow-up over here? They're not following them. They think, wow, it's an interesting thing. Now, on the one hand, they admit God exists. That's a big thing. Okay, but what do they do with that? How far does that go? Do they change anything? So, again, the Egyptians admitted God was fighting against them. They had a right to be buried. That was huge. Huge. Even though, look at all the trouble they caused. Yeah, very good. So if a person admits, okay, I think this is the truth, okay, so now what are you going to do? Nothing. I don't want to be inconvenienced. So isn't it better maybe not to admit the truth? Yeah, admitting the truth is a big thing. Probably get a lot of reward for it. On the other hand, so why aren't you following through? Would they actually ask you if you're Orthodox, they'll come with the law of return? They're going to ask you, if you're Jewish. You have to prove you're Jewish for the law of return. Yeah, a person was married to a Jew, let's say an Israeli, they could come on the law of return, even if they don't convert. Right? But they'll ask you if you converted, what conversion did you have? Not that it matters, right? But if you had a reform or conservative conversion, they'll let you come back on the law of return. Right? 100%. They'll let you come back. Yeah, but if you want to do anything in Israel, person wants to get married, other things, you have to go through the chief rabbinate. Chief rabbinate is Orthodox. There are no conservative rabbinical courts there. You have to go to an Orthodox rabbinical court. Okay, you can do that. Right? So, let's say a person's Jewish. Let's say they prove they're Jewish. There are no conversion. By the law of return, they're not going to ask you if you're Orthodox, Reform, or conservative. They're not going to care. Right? They want to just you to prove that you're Jewish. Now, if you had a conversion, right? One thing by an Orthodox conversion, they're going to want you to live in that community for at least a year before they allow you to come to Israel, right? By Reform or conservative conversion, I don't know if that's the case. But they will ask what type of conversion was it, and they'll ask to see certification. So you could convert as an Orthodox Jew to recognize legitimate conversion within Israel. Yeah, you wouldn't have to convert. Right? In other words, a person, let's say, they converted an Orthodox rabbinical court in America, and it's accepted by the chief rabbinate, you have no issues. If it's not accepted by the chief rabbinate, it's a different issue. But let's say it's accepted by the chief rabbinate, that's not a problem. Right? So if you lived in that community for a year, let's say after conversion, then making Aliyah coming to Israel shouldn't be a problem. Right? Now, so the question is, you can convert as an Orthodox Jew recognized as a legitimated conversion within Israel is based in here. Again, yeah, you wouldn't have to convert. Very good. And tell those who uphold the law of return that you are conservative. I don't know, why would you do that? In other words, if you had a proper conversion, if you had an Orthodox conversion, yeah, why would you tell those who uphold the law of return that you're conservative? That wouldn't make any sense. Right? I wouldn't say that. I don't know why you would say that. In other words, if a person had an Orthodox conversion, they had an Orthodox conversion. Right? Now, let's say they said, okay, let's say like this. Now, I don't know if this is what you mean, but let's say person said I had a proper Orthodox conversion, right? The rabbinical court, the Beis Din, is accepted by the chief rabbinate, and they tell them they're conservative. Now, it kind of looks funny, right? Maybe they'll question the conversion because why are they conservative if they had a proper Orthodox conversion? Yeah. But let's say, let's say the conversion was valid. We'll make it easy. The conversion was valid. 2 years later, 3 years later, they're not, they become conservative. Yeah. They don't stay Orthodox. Now, if the conversion's valid, it's valid. Yeah. Person, if the person, let's say went through an Orthodox conversion and shortly thereafter, they weren't keeping Torah mitzvahs, that calls the conversion into question. That will call it directly into question. Yeah. Someone here says, I told my friend that Orthodox Jews being treated the lowest class of people. Yeah. Why is that? It's been that way for a long time. Why? Because the seculars here don't think we do anything. People sit and learn Torah, they don't do anything for the state. So they'll do whatever they can to make life miserable like they are now. Because this whole thing with the army. Right? They are not they owe billions of shekels to yeshivas. Yeah, they're withholding that money now. Anyone who learns full time, they're taking away certain subsidies. Yeah, certain subsidies that were granted before. Why? Because they want to make life hard for them. But again, even they say, well, the yeshivas don't deserve all that money, billions of shekels, let's say. If the budget is like, 500 million shekels, let's say. Let's say it's 500 million, it's more than that, but let's say. Most of the budget itself is for, it's for military. Okay. So again, let's say the budget is 500 million shekels. Let's say 3 billion shekels goes to yeshivas. It's only 1%. Right? I mean, 5 billion, let's say it's more than 5, whatever. Right? So let's say it's 6% or 10%. Not even, whatever it is. The percentage is so small compared to the rest of the budget. Right? They make a big deal about nothing. They totally make a big deal about nothing. Yeah. Universities get much more money than yeshivas do. They get stipends much more than yeshivas do. Yeshiva students do. Right? But they're doing something. Right? They're going to be productive members of society. I mean, they bring up certain statistics, just to point this out, that are totally fabricated. They're absolutely 100% fabricated. In their numbers, but they keep saying like the same numbers over and over again, right? And whatever people have called them on it, but they don't seem to care, right? They don't really seem to care. This quote, it's kind of like saying like, 50, 60,000 people were killed in Gaza, yeah, which also isn't true, right? And even if it was true, let's say, but they're using Hamas's numbers, which totally skewed. You can't believe them for what they're saying. But even if it would be true, the majority of people who died, right, without getting into politics, the majority of people who died, guess what? They were terrorists. Now, what happens? What happens if kids and women are killed? They're used as human shields. Tragic. Yeah, no one seems to care about that. Without getting into politics. But again, the numbers are totally skewed, and they keep saying the same thing over and over again. And hear people, you hear anti-Semites still saying the same thing over and over again. But the numbers aren't true, right? And even if they were true, 98% of the people being killed are terrorists, as much as possible, right? And there are people being killed, as the Stooges would say, a victim of circumstance. Okay, yeah, but whose fault is that? Hamas uses them as human shields. What do you want? Without getting into politics, but again, it's the same thing. They use the same skewed numbers. And, when it comes to, people learning and this and that, they also use, how many people work, they also use skewed numbers. Right? But, at the end of the day, you got to remember, this country, quote unquote, was founded on the fact they didn't want Torah being learned. They said Ben Gurion at the end of his life said he made one major mistake, right? And that was allowing deferments in the army. Because he said Orthodox Jews are going to disappear. He said that was his big mistake. Then, 100 people here, 50 people there, it's going to die. It's going to be extinct. They said that was the biggest mistake he said on himself. That he allowed all these deferments. Okay. But again, years ago, it wasn't an issue. The reason it wasn't an issue, they made it an issue, but the reason it wasn't an issue because they didn't need them. And I know people that, had to fight to get into the army. They didn't want them. They didn't need them. So now we could say, because what happened October 7th, they need a lot more reserves or whatever. So that's probably argument probably can't be made. Probably can't make that argument today. But it doesn't matter. Again, what's the bottom line? They hate Torah. They will not recognize someone learning Torah indefinitely as something legitimate. I can understand, European countries that would say that. I can understand South American countries that would say that. State of Israel? The Jewish people? The whole of the Jewish people, they're going to say Torah's not worth anything. And to sit and listen is against the law. Really? That's horrific. That is absolutely horrific. Yeah, we're our own worst enemy. So you want to wonder why? So what happens in Israel is because of that. Yeah, we're our own worst enemy. You're going to try and prosecute people for learning Torah? It's unheard of. Unheard of. I can understand communist Russia. I can understand in other places. They don't want people to teach Torah. Okay. But to say it's legitimate? To say it doesn't do anything? I mean, somebody points out, you're right, the world can't exist without Torah. There's Mishnah Pirkei Avos. After the whole genealogy of who taught Torah to who, whatever. The Torah stands on three things. What's one of them? Torah. Sorry, the world stands on three things. One of them is Torah. Can't exist without Torah, you're right. But to prosecute people for learning Torah, that's unheard of. Unheard of. Yeah, so, if I playing God, put on my funny George Burns glasses and my funny mustache, if I playing God over here, I'd be rip-roaring mad. This is how you treat Torah scholars? This is how you teach the Jewish people that, are trying to sit and learn Torah? And you're prosecuting them and giving them a hard time? Okay, God's allowing it to happen, okay. You can't be too happy. Cannot be too happy. The repercussions of that could be catastrophic. Catastrophic. The Chazon Ish, blessed memory of Avram Shai Karowitz, a blessed memory, said, the minute that the government, whatever government it is, in Israel, stops supporting Torah. Stop supporting Torah, they have no kiyum. They will not be established. So the state will fall apart. Yeah, so, God forbid that could happen. Obviously better not to rely on the government for money and all that. Okay, because then you're going to say Baal Mea, Baal Adeya, the person has 100, has the obligation, or they feel they have the obligation to dictate policy and what's going to be taught there and other things. Okay. They make life very difficult, which they're making it very difficult now. You have to raise a lot more money. Very good. But at the end of the day, this is a serious problem, right? This is a major problem where they are going to say that, you want to learn Torah long term, whatever, you're going to have problems, right? We're not going to allow it. We're not going to allow it. And we're going to say it's against the law to do such a thing. I mean, it's unheard of. You would think we're living in communist Russia. That's what you would think. Yeah. That's what you would think. But that being the case, right? That being the case, you got to ask the question. You for sure have to ask the question, why would they do that? Because they hate Torah. The whole purpose, you read, I'm not saying you should, you read Herzl Schmerzel's book about the founding of the state, the Jewish state, as it was called. Yeah, it had nothing to do with Torah mitzvahs. Absolutely zero. And if you didn't have other Orthodox Jews here, it'd be a lot worse. Even Jerusalem would look like Tel Aviv. I mean, be horrific. Without getting into all that. So yeah, they've made life a misery. in absolute misery because they don't want people learning Torah long term. And they'll say we want people to be like everybody else. They want to be secular. They want them to be working. It's like it's like saying if all these people sitting learning Torah, okay, right? Tell me how many over the age of 25, okay. Yeah, and what's the comparison? People over the age of 25 sitting learning and people over 25 working. There are plenty of Orthodox Jews, ultra-Orthodox Jews in the workforce. Well, you know, it's nobody. Not true, right? Again, what they're saying majority of the time is false. They want to rev everybody up. Say, yeah, nobody works. Everyone's, getting this and getting that and whatever. And nobody's doing anything. Not true. There are people learning Torah. Very good. There are people over the age of 25 learning Torah. Yeah, as if to say, everyone over the age of 25 sitting learning Torah full time, nobody's working. That's an outright lie. And again, the media is very good for that. I mean, again, you have very strong leftist presence, in Israel. You got, people coming back and people coming more traditional, and all that. But there's, by the elite, there's like serious animosity. Serious animosity to the extent where they'll say someone learns Torah full time, it's not an option. And they want to do whatever they can to make it not an option. Right? And that you need the Erev, the mixed multitude, to get destroyed, as the Vilna Gaon says in Evan Shlema, that the mixed multitude has to be destroyed before the Messiah can come. And the mixed multitude is anybody seemingly like, in Jewish leadership position that are fighting against Torah. Yeah, whether in Israel or outside of Israel. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people still need to be destroyed in the process. Right? Someone asks, is the possibility to learn and work? Sure. Yeah, there are people that say learn during the day and work, during the day and the night. Work American hours, or let's say learn part of the morning and work in the afternoon. It's possible. Or they work, let's say, later in the morning, have a few hours to learn, and then work, later. Some jobs you can't do that. Some jobs you got to work from, let's say, 9 to 4, right? 8:30 to 3:30, whatever it is, right? But most people that work, depending on how demanding it is, will find time to learn for sure, right? But it definitely is possible, right? It's definitely possible. I was working for a title company, a real estate title company. So I had to work from like 4 to, I don't know, 11:30, right? And sometimes later, not usually. But again, it can be a grueling schedule, right? Depending, but you can do it. It's for sure doable. There are a lot of people that do it. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, depends on the job, depends what it is. But is it possible? Yeah, 100%. 100% is possible. In some cases, not, but it's definitely possible. If a person wants it that bad, they'll be able to do it, right? Hopefully they'll be able to find something to be able to, to be able to do that, maximize the amount of time they can learn for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? I'm gonna stop here before I turn into a pumpkin. I do this every Saturday. 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos, Q&As, Ethics of Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at gmail.com, IBBI, CHAIM, COFFMA.